When this came back to me and I found out that you were saying I had done other things to you, I contacted all of the other children and asked them, did I do anything to you? I was flabbergasted and befuddled because I trusted you, I believed you, I loved you as a sister in my mind at this time. That's how I think of you. And I had no knowledge of doing anything to you. And then I thought, well, if I did this to her, what have I done to others? And I couldn't find anybody that said I had done anything. And I certainly didn't think I did. And then at one point going through this, I'm thinking, maybe Melissa's making this up. Maybe Melissa's having some kind of a break with reality.
One of my first questions to him was, why?
Some of my question is just why you would do that to harm me. Why? Do you know why?
I think why questions are really important, but that's not what we're doing here today. Today, while we're here, and what this video is about is asking the question, what does an abuser sound like when he is twisting the story? I don't want to overstate this, but the amount of damage that can be done to a child or to a grown victim once she comes out with her story and then the abuser rebuttals the story, there is so much harm that can be done, sometimes even more harm than the actual abuse is what happens once it's out in the open and how people respond. And the amount of people that will believe the abuser is astounding to me. You're about ready to hear a very complex story, a very complex narrative from my abuser, where it seems like he's telling the truth, he's being forthright, then maybe he's not, then maybe he is. It is extremely confusing. What does it look like? What does it sound like when an abuser is twisting the tale, twisting the story of abuse to his own advantage? Here's what gets so complicated about this, is that when you're outside the situation, it seems very clear. The abuser's lies typically seem very blatant and obvious. When you're inside the situation, when the abuser is someone you love, even if you're not his victim, you're just in his vicinity, the pull to believe is real. I have been listening to Victor's voice on these police recordings all week long as I have edited, and I have thought, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Melissa, I have suffered over this mentally. I have agonized over this. I have suffered over this. I'm at that point. I can't hurt anymore. Why did I do it to you? And I didn't do it to anybody else. I reached out to everybody I could think of and asked those really hard questions, which were difficult for me to say to. Did I ever touch you inappropriately or do anything to you as a child or as a young adult? And everybody came back with a no.
It's embarrassing, but I still feel that pull to believe him. Even though I know the truth, it is hard when you're in the situation. What I want to try to convey is what I have worked and practiced on. And listen, I'm not perfect at it, but I want to be really clear what I'm trying to do with my own personal story. I want to look at the situation as a whole, not as individual little problems. We've got to come up above the situation and we've got to look at it like we're in an airplane, at 30,000 feet where we can sort of see the whole problem. Now, before we get started, if you have not seen part 1, I highly suggest you click here and go and start with part 1 so you get a better picture of what is actually happening here. And also, just so that you know, if you did see part 1, YouTube is like, no thank you, ma'am. Not because YouTube wants to keep sexual abuse in the closet or hidden. It's not that. It's that businesses do not want to put their ads on this video because I say predator, because I say child sexual abuse. All of that stuff gets flagged by the YouTube AI. They're listening. Will you just hear me out just for a second? I believe in this series so much. And so I want to just show you sort of what's happening here on YouTube. I went and found a video, What God is Teaching Me About Grief. It has approximately the same number of views as part 1 in the series When Predators Go to Church. They're almost the same amount of views. But for the first video, What God is Teaching Me About Grief, that one, YouTube has served up to over 3,000 people. That does not mean that 3,000 people watched it, but they allowed it to go into 3,300 people's YouTube feed, because When Predators Go to Church series is about child sexual abuse. That means that YouTube puts a stop. They will pull it back and not introduce it to people because of the subject matter, which I do not ask this often, but it's because I so deeply believe in this subject. I deeply believe it needs to be talked about. I'm asking, would you share it? Do a couple people come to mind that you could text the link to and just say, hey, would you watch this series with me? And could we have a conversation about it? This would be your church leaders. This would be the people that you're in small group with. This would be your family members, that we are engaging in this very important conversation about the safety of our children and creating protective environments for them. It is what God wants for us and for the church. Before we get into actually hearing the police recordings, I need to back up so that you can see how in the world did I get here. In 2017, I stepped down from teaching the Bible to women, and this was a really big step for me. I sensed in my spirit that God was asking me to do this. I was making up all kinds of reasons why he must be asking me to do this, which I think none of them were the case. I'm not sure I would have sat down if I knew what he was actually asking me to do. But as I sat and as I was quiet and as I was not leading anybody, this is the ministry that's happening. And as that happened, it's like that secret started to make its way up until like I'm choking on it. And to be specific, I mean what happened to me at the age of 19. This was the secret. I'm not even thinking about my childhood. I'm just thinking about the 19-year-old event that happened. So I tell my family, and of course I tell him, and this is done mostly through a long written letter spelling out exactly what happened when I was 19. At first he denied it and said he did not remember. This is what was texted to a family member maybe 5 or 6 hours after he read my account of what happened when I was 19. He says, after continuing to think about it, I was able to resurrect memories of that event. He means what happened when I was 19. Although still a bit foggy. I know I did it. I remember it. I'm trying to remember other things, which I'm sure I did, but time and probably subconscious is blocking and making it hard. At this point, impossible. But I'm not giving up. And I got the text, and at first, I feel this feeling of relief, like he's admitted it. He says he remembered it. He says, I know I did it. I did not feel relieved. Actually, I felt worse. And to make a long story short, I ended up pulling out a journal, and I kept having this loop play through my mind of when I was 11, 12 years old. So I'm like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to just start writing this out, like just to get it. Have you ever done this where it's like, if I could just get it on paper, then I can move on from this. This has been a terrible experience. I don't know why this is looping, but I'm just gonna write it out. And as I wrote it out, I had never thought of the event in one single narrative. I only remembered it in bits and pieces. And whenever it would come up, like if I would see his face above me or directly beside me, or when Jared would approach me in a certain way, and I would get like real weird about it. And then I would tell myself, don't think about it, don't think about it, don't think about it, don't think about it. I would say that real quick in my mind until it would go black and it would just be gone. If I could be in an Olympic match of like making something disappear on the inside of me, I think I could be an Olympian. I don't mean to brag. And because of that, I'm only thinking about it in these pieces. And then when I see a piece of it, I'm like, don't think about it. And then it goes black. It's never fully formed and put together because I did not want it to be fully formed and put together. But for whatever reason, after getting this text from him, it must have been time. I don't know, where I was ready to face it and to look at it. And it just all came out. It was a terrible day. It was a terrible week. It was a terrible month. And that was a 3-year-long, intense journey. Supportive family, for the most part. Everyone believed me. They did not think I was lying. Extremely supportive friends. I am buoyed and cushioned on every side. I've got an extremely supportive husband, and it still was besides our daughter, Adora, passing away at the age of 2, besides that, it was the worst time of my life. I felt like my whole soul was exposed. Like, these beliefs and hatred that I had for myself were so far down deep. It's like working on this stuff felt like scraping the bottom of the barrel of my soul. Like it went all the way down. Early on, when all of this came out, a friend asked me, she said, "Are you going to go to the police?" And I said, no, I'm never going to the police. There's no world in which I would ever go to the police. Number one, I'm not talking about this to anybody. I'm not sharing the details. Going to court, shoot me now. I know how this sounds, but it was just the truth. I don't want to get him in trouble. I don't want him to go to jail. Even though what he did was terrible and evil, there were still a lot of parts of what I consider to be a fatherly relationship, that he was good to me, that I loved him, that I believed that he loved me as well. Around the 3-year mark, after really doing some intensive work, I started to get this nagging feeling, not settling right, that he was still out in our community. He was still working at a college. He no longer in our family. My sister had divorced him. So my assumption is he's out dating, or at least talking with other women. They will have children or grandchildren, that he will be in their homes. And it's just like, all of a sudden I couldn't sit well with that. It was somewhere in the fall of 2021 that a family member had seen him out, Victor, out at a restaurant, and he was meeting a woman, and that woman had a 2 or 3-year-old, what probably was a grandchild, with her. And like, that was it. Like, that put a fire under me.
Hello.
Hey, Victor, it's Melissa.
Hi, Liz.
I know you requested or said you were willing to talk to me, but I wasn't willing yet to talk to you. And that's because, it took me some time to learn to stand and face. So this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn how to stand and face and not run and avoid. I'm grateful, and I think you're willing to help me. Is that right? Do you feel open to that?
I'll say anything I can do, I'm willing to do. I am so sorry. I can't tell you how sorry I am. I can never tell you how sorry I am. I don't have any answers. I don't know why I did some of the things I did. I don't even know what I did, apparently. So whatever I can do, you just tell me.
What was happening, like, in myself at this moment was I was feeling pulled in 2 different directions, because my heart, just even hearing his voice, felt a pull toward him. I missed him. I hadn't seen him in 4 years. But on the other hand, I was quietly asking myself, like, in my gut that God has given me, in my spirit, like, did his crying feel real? And the answer from the neck down in my gut was, I don't think so. One interesting thing to note, and you're going to hear this in this conversation, there is typically 2 answers that an abuser will give to sexual abuse charges. The first one is complete denial, that they did not do it. The second one is, and this is what I was surprised at, is the answer is, I don't remember. So from just this little clip at the very beginning where he's crying, he is sounding very repentant, right? He's saying things like, anything I can do, I'm willing to do. I can never tell you how sorry I am. That's a good thing to say, right? Then we get a little bit less helpful. I don't have any answers. I don't know why. I don't even know what I did, apparently. So do you see how we went from, I will do anything I can to help, all the way down to, I don't even know what I did. This is why for me, when I've been close to these situations, it can feel so confusing because you are being pulled in different directions.
Now, when you say, did that to harm you, what did I do?
Okay, we can go into that. Yeah, we can go into that. And I know that you had requested. And one of the things that you said then was, I'm trying to remember other things, which I'm sure I did, but time and probably subconscious is blocking it, making it hard. At this point, it's impossible. And then you said, I wish I could remember, but let's see, but I need the people I have injured to tell me what I did.
This was a recurring theme with Victor. He wanted to be told exactly what he did, and maybe on the surface that sounds like a reasonable request. But can you also see on the flip side where there is possibly a power struggle on the information? This is so complicated. Even as I'm trying to explain it, I'm like swirling, because on one hand, the abuser sounds so reasonable to say, I need the injured parties to come to me to tell me what I've done. And what he's saying is, I need specific examples because I can't remember. We can always just take that at face value and say, okay, here's a guy who doesn't remember, who is reasonably asking someone to bring the information to him so that maybe it will refresh his memory on what he has done. But remember, we may be dealing with a wolf in sheep's clothing, one who is not really trying to take responsibility, but is trying to figure out, how much do I have to confess to make this go away? And if I just start confessing, I may confess something that I did not need to confess. So I need you to tell me what you remember so that I'm confessing to the right thing. In my opinion, he was looking to be back in control by having the information so that then he could mold the story. In this portion of the conversation, I am asking him what he remembers of fondling me when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. And this is what he had to say.
What I remember is, as a child, you used to stick your arm out and say, "Mother me," and I guess the correct term would be effleurage, where you take your fingertips and just kind of rub over it. It gives someone goosebumps. And you used to ask for that.
When I asked him what he remembered about fondling me as a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, I was so mortified that he started here with me. I wanted to melt into the floor. We're gonna back that up and listen again. When I'm asking him about his actions, what he did to me, he starts off with what I did as a 5-year-old, what I wanted as a 5-year-old, what I enjoyed as a 5-year-old. So listen with that filter in mind.
What I remember is, as a child, you used to stick your arm out and say, "Mother me," and I guess the correct term would be effleurage, where you take your fingertips and just kind of rub over it. It gives someone goosebumps. And you used to ask for that. And then I think, and I have no direct memory of doing this, but I think I probably did that kind of as a massage, not a massage, but as something that you enjoyed doing.
He had already told a family member when they were in counseling together that he probably fondled me as a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, that sounded like something he would probably do. So that's what's happening here. He doesn't want to come out and say it, but he's kind of saying it. And then watch directly what he says after it to autocorrect his own admission. I'm going to back up just a few seconds.
And then I think, and I have no direct memory of doing this, but I think I probably did that kind of as a massage, not a massage, but as something that you enjoyed doing.
I think I kind of did like a massage, not a massage, but as something you, Melissa, enjoyed doing.
It is something that you enjoyed doing, is that I would move my fingertips over your skin. The only thing I physically actually remember is you doing it with your arm, and I remember doing it, but I don't know if I went beyond that or not.
What he had told a family member was that he liked to do, and he said on anybody, because he liked touching anybody, that he liked to do what he termed sensual massaging. And so he admitted, would I sensually massage Melissa when she was 3, 4, 5 years old? Yes. Would I fondle her? Probably. When he gets on the phone with me, he does not go that far, and he is not that clear. Looking back, I wish I would have asked him more clarifying questions, but I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed. I felt like what he was saying, actually, let's look at the words exactly. He starts off with, what I remember is that as a child, you, Melissa, you're initiating this. You would stick out your arm and say, this is embarrassing, rubber me. Yes, I would say that. That is true. What he's saying is not false. That is true. This little girl at 3 years old, at 4 years old, would stick out her arm and say, rubber me. That was true. He goes on to say, like, the correct term is effarage. When I would say rubber me. No, I did not use the correct term. But yes, that is what I meant, like fingertips over skin. And he says, and you used to ask for that. You asked for it. Like, literally, we hear these things as like a joke, like, oh, she was asking for it. There is something that happens that I keep seeing a pattern of, not just in my story, but in other stories around me, where the abuser will twist the story in such a way that no longer is the 5-year-old the victim, or the 10-year-old, or the 14-year-old, or the 17-year-old. Instead, those children become the predator, and they're seeking it out. They're asking for it, which sounds ridiculous, but the amount of people around the abuser that will actually believe this to be true is astounding. So let's get to where he actually kind of admits something, sort of. It's cushioned with, I think, I probably did that as kind of a massage, not a massage, but as something you enjoyed. Melissa, this was your idea. You would stick your arm out to me. You enjoyed this. You asked for this. And that's all I remember. This next video is his response to me sharing with him everything that I remember about what happened when I was 19. He agrees to that. He admits that, like the text that you saw, he says, I remember it. I did it. This is what I had to ask him. I'm right back to why again.
Was that impulsive? What? Why?
And I ask myself that question, and I have beat myself up over it. I don't have any kind of a good answer for that.
When I ask why, he says he doesn't have a good answer. And now listen to what he says. I wish that this was the answer, because that would be a good answer. Let's see what that is.
I wish I could say, oh, well, I had fantasized about doing this forever, and for whatever reason did it.
In his mind, what is a good answer to what he did to me at 19, a reasonable answer would have been, I've been fantasizing about this forever, and I finally just did it. He wishes, that's what he says, I wish I could tell you it was just, I fantasized about it and then I did it. In his mind, for whatever reason, that would be a good answer. A good answer would have been, my mind was wicked. My heart was wicked. I didn't care for anybody else but myself, and I wanted to do it, so I did it. I have no excuse.
I have no explanation for why I did that. In talking to my therapist and trying to come to some understanding of what I did and why I would have done it, because now looking back, and even then thinking about you and the other children, I would have not done anything consciously to have hurt anybody, but apparently I did, and I don't know I don't know why. I don't know what was going through my mind. It's the best I can do, and what the therapist told me is that you just kind of blank out and your subconscious takes over. It's kind of like when you've got an addiction and the alcohol kicks in and you don't remember what you did. I don't know if I believe that or not. It sounds odd, but I'm living the results of doing things that I have no recollection of or have suppressed. Apparently there are things that I do remember now that I had totally suppressed, and when I found out about them, I was shocked at myself at what I had done. And apparently there are other things that, by your testimony, that I have done that I don't remember at all, and I don't know if I ever will. But I think that, maybe by having somebody confront me with it and tell me what I did, maybe I'll remember it, maybe I won't. I don't know.
This gets so complicated. I'm trying to figure out what to tell you just to give you enough to understand what I'm talking about. Remember I said there's a bit of power that I believe Victor was trying to take back by taking back control of the narrative, meaning if he did not have the exact incidences that I was talking about, it's my opinion he didn't know which ones to choose or which ones to confess to, because he wanted that information from me first. Now, what one of my family members did, who seriously took on such a load for the family in dealing with Victor, I'm like eternally grateful for the work that was put in, because very early on, I was not giving details to anyone. Not my husband, not my family, not my friends. The only person I was talking about some of the details to was my counselor. It is very hard to articulate these things. I don't want to hear them come out of my mouth and reach my ears. I would rather have them locked away. And I'm most certainly not telling my family. It's mortifying. It's embarrassing. You feel shame and guilt. And yes, I'm adult. I know all the right answers. That does not mean that I felt any different. The only thing that I would tell this family member who was going to counseling with Victor was, I believe the family member actually asked me and I would say yes or no. I said yes to fondling, like at 4, 5, 6. When the family member asked me about kissing, the person was like, you mean like kissing you on your cheek, like pecking you on the mouth? And I'm like, no, I'm talking about real kissing. I'm not talking about a peck here or a peck on my lips. I'm talking about adult type kissing. So the reason you need to know that is that information was given to Victor. Not exact details, not when, how, where, just you've got 2 categories to think about. Inappropriately kissing a child, French kissing a child, and fondling a child. Once Victor was told those 2 different categories, he came back with, well, I probably did sensually tickle her, I probably fondled her. And he came back with, well, there was this incident of French kissing. And he goes on to explain it. I have a question about this incident of French kissing. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? What you mentioned at counseling?
Yes. I will tell you what I remember, which is not real clear because I remembered the incident, but until brought it up or made some mention of it, I think it was he that brought it up, or maybe I just remembered the incident and thought, well, maybe this is connected somehow.
Victor remembered this incident on his own. It was not brought up by me. It was not brought up by the other person that this incident was actually about. This was coming just directly from Victor.
But I really thought in digging through my memories, I was trying to think of everything I had ever done that could have been construed as inappropriate or that was inappropriate. And I remembered thinking it was that had come home from school one day and had been in some class where there was a discussion about French kissing, and I can't imagine doing that. And on the spur of the moment, I French kissed her. To my memory, that was a quick one and done thing. It was a really, really stupid thing to have done, but there was nothing emotional or sexual meant by it.
All right, we got to pause there. That was a lot. He's saying oh, this must have been you, Melissa, but I remember it being this other child, and actually was the other child, it wasn't me. Now remember, this is always going to start with the victim. So his story is the child comes to him, it's the child's prompting, and that what he did was a quick one and done. He says it was a really stupid thing, but there was nothing emotional or sexual meant by it. It was just stupid. It was just a stupid thing that he did. I want you to listen for how he minimizes what he did. And this is also a constant theme, that it was not meant to be sexual. Even what he did to me at 19, he didn't fantasize about it. He had never thought about it before. It just sort of happened. In the same way with this other child, it was just, and he used the word just, stupid. It was just, I'm inserting this word, a mistake. It was just impulsive. I did not mean anything emotional or sexual about it. I want you to think, if you've got a child or you're an aunt or an uncle, you're a grown adult and there's an 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old. In what world do you French kiss them when they're talking about learning something new like that? That is so twisted and weird and strange and not right. But I'm not sure that Victor can appreciate the strangeness of the story, because in my opinion, his mind is so twisted that that is actually not that big of a deal. It can be seen as just something stupid and impulsive that he did.
I French kissed her. To my memory, that was a quick one and done thing. It was a really stupid thing to have done, but there was nothing emotional or sexual meant by it. It was just a stupid thing that I did. And totally in hindsight, it was inappropriate, it was gross, it was stupid, and that's all I remember of it.
That actually was.
So I'm telling him that it actually was the other child and it was not me. And the reason I know that 100% to be the case is I did not remember this until he brought it up. But I'm going to go on to tell him when he told me about this incident, which I was around 11 or 12. And this is actually a part of grooming. An abuser or someone who is preying on a child will introduce sexual kinds of conversation, even if it's like in jest or what have you. And so I believe that's what he was doing with me at 11 and 12 when I was experiencing the worst of my abuse. He did tell me this story, and it was about the person he thinks it's about.
He did tell me about it. I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and we were sitting at the table at Biltmore. You and I, for some reason, in the mornings, I guess Martha would leave early with the kids, and we would eat breakfast together. I don't know if you remember that or not. And you had told me that, and it was. So you are remembering correctly, is what I wanted to say. It was not me.
That's a relief for that.
It was now time to turn the corner and to talk about what happened to me at 11 and 12. And if you watched part 1, this was the most intense part. It's the part of my story, what he did, the actions he took, that did not have a statute of limitation on it. And I'll say this much, just because I think there's a lot of confusion around sexual abuse. It does not have to be rape to be sexual abuse. And there's lots of ways to get around that. Rape leaves evidence. Victor was too smart, too cunning, in my estimation, of a wolf to leave evidence. But even though I wasn't raped, here in Virginia, what he did do has no statute of limitations on it, which I'm super grateful for those who have pushed to get those laws changed. What I noticed in this mind game, and it truly felt and still feels like a mind game, what I knew was that he knew exactly what he could be charged for and what he couldn't. This is just my opinion. I believe he was willing to confess to what he knew he could not be convicted for. He could not be convicted for French kissing a child 40 years later. He could not be convicted for fondling me or sensually massaging me, whatever he wants to call it. He could not be convicted 40 years later. He could not be convicted for what he did in the van to me, the sexual battery, that had a 3-year statute of limitation on it. Therefore, those were much easier to get him to admit to. Where he would hold his line was at what he did at 11 and 12, because I believe he knew that could get him charged for child sexual abuse. And I believe that's where you'll see him firm up a bit, and when he will clearly turn into the victim.
Because the frustrating thing for me, Victor, is these things that happened to me, it was me and you, just us. And if you cannot remember it, it leaves me really alone, like just alone.
Melissa, I have suffered over this mentally, knowing it. The situation I have put you in, the situation I have put the family in, is my doing. I have agonized over this. I have suffered over this. I'm at that point. I can't hurt anymore. I've lost my family. I've lost the people that I love. I haven't seen any of my grandchildren for almost 4 years. I'm at rock bottom, and I would gladly tell you everything that I could. There was a point in time that I thought that whatever you were doing was made up, and I cannot believe I know it's 100% real to you, and it likely happened, but I cannot believe I did what you just said I did. I find that so antithetical to me, to how I would treat people. And the fact that I can't remember it is very frustrating.
I find this description to be especially hard. If you do not want to hear something about child pornography, fast forward probably just 2 minutes. Go ahead and hit fast forward. Otherwise, we're going to listen to it.
Do you see yourself as someone with a sexual disorder in any way, shape, or form?
Yes.
Okay.
Every way, shape, and form. Well, no, I take that back. Not every way, shape, and form. Yes, I have an extreme sexual problem.
Just to let you know what's happening during the conversation, I'm in a small box of a room with 2 detectives, and Detective Bond is sitting at the table with me, and she's got like a legal pad of paper, and she's writing notes to me as I'm on the call. The call was on speakerphone. And so after he admits he's got an extreme sexual addiction, she's writing child pornography. Ask him about child pornography. And I'm wondering, how do I ask him about this without shutting him down? So this is me in the moment trying to ask him softly about child porn without calling it child porn.
You know, I'm not looking to know what your sexual addiction looks like or what that is. Obviously, that's not appropriate. But where it does affect me would be, was there a time where you were looking at either underage girls or attracted to underage girls via pornography? Was that something that was in your addiction?
Not purposely. In other words, I didn't go out looking for it. Back in the early days of surfing for pornography, there were not nearly as many constraints on websites and legal restrictions as there are now. So Wild West. And I did see some child porn pictures. Sexuality is something that is stimulating to me, and I didn't dwell on them, but I won't say that I didn't find them sexually attractive, not because they were children, but just because of the sex. But I never, ever purposely went out looking for child porn.
What I hear is someone saying that they accidentally came across child pornography, which actually, that term child pornography, what many courts are using now is CSAM, child sexual abuse material. The reason that shift is important, to be clear, what he's saying is, when I laid eyes accidentally or on purpose, let's just go with his story that it was accidental, that when he laid his eyes on a child being sexually abused, that was sexually stimulating to him. Now, in his phrasing, not because it was a child, but because it was sexual. I don't live in anybody else's brain. I don't understand how other people feel. But to me, that is so abnormal to see a 5 or 8 or 11 or 12 or 13-year-old being abused sexually, and to get gratification from that, like, makes my stomach sick. I don't understand it. I don't understand how he doesn't see that that is very bizarre, even if his story, which I don't believe, but even if his story is absolutely accurate, and it feels like we're in a dance where he wants to give me enough information to feel like he's being absolutely transparent with me, but to still keep it in the bounds that he thinks is normal or appropriate or excusable. I go on to ask him this.
From an outsider's perspective, if it was outside me and outside you, I think you could appreciate if someone were to hear that, let's just take the two things that you would say are true. You French kissed your probably when she was, 12, 13, 14 years old. That's extremely strange. And you surrounded yourself with children all through your life. You married a woman who fostered children, adopted children. You worked at schools. You are the profile. Would you be able to say objectively that you can see that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I were outside looking in, I'd want to smash my head against the pavement. I fit the profile. There is no question about that. When I think consciously about what I did and why I did what I did as far as surrounding myself with children and doing things for children, it was because I love children in a fatherly way. I wanted to please them. I set up a playroom for them. I had popcorn. I had movies. I had a playground outside for the grandchildren. I did all these things because I love children and I love to make them smile and love to make them happy. And that is my look at myself up until all this has happened.
Is this a lie to me? Is it a lie to himself? I have no idea. Quickly after this, our call dropped and we had to get back on the phone, and he's like, wait, where were we at? We were talking about you fitting the profile.
Yes, I agree. I fit the profile. My questions then, why did I do it to you and I didn't do it to anybody else? I don't know. That's
well, let's you French kissed. So,
yes, okay.
So it was not just me, and I'm not able to tell anybody else's story but my own.
I was towing a line here. This long pause is, how do I not tell somebody else's story that is asked not to be told, but how do I also let him know this narrative that he's allowing to play in his head, that nobody else has a story but Melissa? That's not true.
And I'm not able to tell anybody else's story but my own. That's all that I can say with that. So I would not assume that it's just me. I would not assume that if I were you.
If I was like this, and this is what was so hard for me then, and it's better for me now hearing it come directly from you.
I'm going to back this up, because what's happening here is he's unraveling, because I've now said, don't think this is just me. Don't think it's the child that you French kissed. I wouldn't think that if I were you. And there's this spiraling. When I had seen previous emails or texts, there's always a little dropping. He's always been wondering if anybody else had come out with anything. It's that looking for information and not having it. And he wants the information, in my opinion, so that he could mold and craft a story. And now he's realizing that there's more information out there. That's not just me. Now it's somebody else. And I believe this is him panicking. I'm going to rewind it. It's going to sound like I've done something to the audio or I've sped up the audio. I've done nothing to the audio. This is literally what he sounded like. So Let's take a listen to what panic sounds like.
All the other, if I was like this, and this is what was so hard for me then, and it's better for me now hearing it come directly from you to say that this was your experience, and thank you for sharing the specifics of what happened. As hard as that is for me to hear and to believe, at least I reached out to everybody I could think of and asked those really hard questions, which were difficult for me to say to. Did I ever touch you inappropriately or do anything to you as a child or as a young adult? And everybody came back with a no.
He goes back to the same thought of, I've asked everybody, as if it's as simple as asking and getting an answer. These things are extremely complex, even as it comes to asking a child, has anybody ever touched you inappropriately? And they say no, and then as a parent, you're like, whew, it's not that easy. It is quite complex. What I hear him saying is panicking and reaching for, thank you, Melissa, for actually telling me what you had to tell me and saying it to my face. Thank you for doing that. And I've done everything that I could. And this was hard for me to ask these people if I'd ever inappropriately touched them. That's hard for me. That was hard on me. I did the hard work. And they all said no. We wrapped up that phone call. I think it was like an hour and 15-minute phone call. Obviously, I'm not sharing the whole phone call with you. These were the parts that I thought might be most helpful for you to hear someone who is still out for their own good, who still does not want to be caught, does not want to be held accountable. I mean, really held accountable. I don't mean partially held accountable. I don't mean admitting to as much as they can to get off the hook and back in the family, because that was his motivation for this phone call with me, was for the family to be reconciled, for him to be able to see his grandchildren. As soon as we hung up, I said this to the detectives.
All right, bye-bye. It's so conflicting to me.
And boy, did I feel conflicted. Hearing his voice, hearing his partial confessions, hearing his repentance, if you will, I felt conflicted. I felt like I don't want this man to go to jail. I don't want him to be humiliated. I don't want that. And then on the other side of me is this deep knowing that he was not well, and that in my opinion, he was a danger to other kids around him. Nobody knew this about him at his place of work. No women that he was in friendships with or dating knew this about him. It was still a really good kept secret. And so on one hand, I care for him. I don't want to see him suffer, lose his job, go to jail. On the other hand, I do not want this to happen to anybody else. And it's like those two things were in direct conflict with each other. It appears I was wrong in my optimism, and after our conversation last week, when she shared more details of what she believed had happened to her as a child, I can no longer pander to her psychosis or false memories or whatever they are. I never abused her as a child, period. I repeat, I am not calling her a liar, although that is a distinct possibility. It is my opinion that she somehow actually believes her own false narrative. She needs professional help.